Let's get back to thinking about actually making the poster. I at least find it really helpful to sketch out a rough layout on paper where I start to think about what I want to go where, including what the headings might look like, what kinds of charts or graphs I might include, and a little bit about the bullet points. Even at this point, I'll start kind of thinking to myself what the story is I'm trying to tell and the order in which I'm trying to tell it, because that will help influence the order in which I put things on my poster. At this point, it's also helpful to consider, again, who will be viewing your poster. Is it going to be viewed by subject matter experts? Maybe you're going to a conference in a very specialized field. Then you're probably going to want to put a lot of detail on here, but maybe don't need as much background. Is it for a broadly familiar audience, so people who work in your general area and are broadly knowledgeable but maybe don't know a lot about your specific area? Or is it actually for non-experts who come from many different fields, in which case you might need to pull back a little bit, put on more of the rationale and the background, think about highlighting only the kind of most salient results, and just try to keep the whole thing from becoming really overwhelming for somebody who doesn't know a lot about that topic. How should you make your poster? Well, many of you probably already have an idea of how you would do this. You can certainly use PowerPoint. It's very easy to use. And I actually find that it works quite well for making posters. Adobe Illustrator certainly is, in many ways, is a more sophisticated drawing program, but it is more difficult to learn. And so that would be, if you're comfortable with it, then that's great. If not, I would probably suggest going with PowerPoint. But as listed on this slide, there are some other illustration programs that you might consider using. Also think about how you're going to analyze your data and present it. So there are several different graphing programs, for example, that can not only help you with analysis, but also are quite flexible in terms of how you present your data. And so you might want to explore, as I mentioned earlier, different ways that you can show your data. How are you going to show variability in your data, for example? And you might want to check with your research mentor about what kinds of tools are best in your particular field. So once you decide where you're going to make your poster, set your file or your artboard to the size of the poster right from the beginning. Don't try to do that later, so you can change the page size to fit exactly the dimensions of your poster. Then start using the sketch you made, or again, you might be using a template that you downloaded from somewhere. Be aware that kind of resizing things, aligning, it all takes time regardless of what program you're using. PowerPoint does, this is the example on here is from PowerPoint, has ways to ensure that your text and your figures are either aligned or centered with each other. Take the time to do that. It really makes a big difference in how your poster looks, whether you've just kind of lined things up by eye or whether you have carefully aligned things using the tools available in the program. Okay, so be picky. It really does matter. And you can kind of zoom in and out. If you zoom into 100%, that's useful to know if things you're doing are big enough and if they look good. Zooming out lets you get a sense of whether the overall layout is pleasing and works well. So these are just some guidelines. They're not absolute rules, but about point sizes you might want to use. Typically, probably don't want to get much smaller than 16 or 18 point font, or it's going to start to get really difficult for people to read. Again, this depends a little bit on whether you are presenting only when you are there to talk about your poster, or whether somebody might be standing there to read it. But remember, if you have 3 or 4 people in front of your poster, nobody is going to be very close. And so you need to keep the font large enough that they can easily read it. So once you have a draft of your poster, take a look at it and ask yourself if there's anything that makes the poster look too busy. I think overcrowding a poster, it certainly for me is my biggest problem that I have, and I really need to zoom out or even print it out and look at it on an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper and ask myself, if I see this poster, am I so overwhelmed that I don't even want to stop to look at it? Remove any fancy fonts, okay, and make sure you have a cohesive color palette. Color is really nice, but you can overdo it and it can turn people away sometimes. Send it to your research colleagues, to your mentors for comments and edits. And very importantly, try talking through your poster, okay? Now, again, for the research fair judging, remember that the poster will be judged without you, okay? But it's important to think about how you're going to present your poster. Are there awkward transitions? Often those awkward transitions are because either something is missing or the order isn't right on your poster. You don't want to figure that out once you've printed it and you're trying to practice talking it through. Do it now, okay? Which is what I just said. So don't wait until after you print to actually try it out. And then your last steps before printing: proofread, proofread, proofread. Again, I would print the poster on normal printer paper and go through it very carefully so nothing looks worse than a typo in your title blown up to poster size. Check again that everything is aligned. Look at the poster at 100% magnification on your computer. You will have to kind of scan over the whole thing. Sometimes images will become pixelated when you put them at that magnification. And if that's the case, you need to replace that picture. It needs to look good at 100% magnification, or that's how it will look when it gets printed. After the poster is printed, take a look at it and make sure everything is okay. And then this is a good time to practice your presentation. One thing I suggest is think about having a shorter and a longer version, with the shorter version being 3 to 4 minutes, and the longer version maybe being up to 10 minutes, depending on the interest of your audience. Part of presenting a poster is being able to judge for the people standing in front of you whether they are kind of getting impatient and they just want a quick overview, or whether they have a lot of interest in that topic and want more detail. You can just ask them outright, but it's also, a matter of kind of watching their body language and deciding when you should speed up or slow down. And ask someone to listen to your presentation and give you feedback. All right, things to kind of avoid, and I think I've already talked about most of these, but it helps to just point them out one more time. So avoid excessive text or text that is too small, fonts that are hard to read. Always look at full magnification to avoid pixelated figures. JPEGs in general are something to stay away from. They tend to cause problems. Try to avoid putting too much on your poster. Saying less can often be more effective. We always want to tell people everything we did, but if they end up leaving completely confused, then we might as well not have told them anything, okay? So cut back on what you're trying to say and have what you're saying be very impactful. Leave some space around the edge for printing. It can happen if you put things out at the very edge of your artboard that it gets cut off after the printing. So it's typically a good idea to leave, maybe about an inch margin around the edge of the poster. And finally, just, this happens to all of us, but it's best to try avoid rushing to finish your poster at the last minute. As with anything, you'll end up with a better product if you can take the time, finish it ahead of time, and have a chance to put it away for a moment, pick it up again and look at it, and then make any adjustments.